morning, AWS Singapore Summit. I'm happy to be here. Let me introduce myself. My name is Peter DeSantis, and I run our AWS global infrastructure and customer support teams. I've been at Amazon for over 21 years, and in that time, I originally worked on the Amazon retail business, and then in 2006, I moved to AWS, and I've had a number of different roles since the early days of AWS. And when people find out that I've been at Amazon for so long, they often ask me what keeps me there. And the answer to this is simple for me. First, I've had the opportunity to work with a number of brilliant, interesting, and passionate people. And second, I've had the opportunity to build. I am a passionate builder, and the ability to build new things and put them in customers' hands is what brings me satisfaction in my job. I know this room is probably full of passionate builders, and hopefully you're here to find out how you can build cool and new things for your customers. Now, one of the things about building is that having the right tool is critical. It makes things easier, faster, more cost-effective. I'm a builder. I'm a builder at work, and I'm a builder at home. These are actually my tool chests, not servers. And if you notice, if you look really closely, I actually go so far as to put barcodes on some of the drawers in my tools. I've built an app to help me find the tool that I'm looking for, because nothing is more frustrating than not being able to find the right tool when you're trying to build something. The same is true when you're trying to build applications for your business and your end customers. Without the right tool, you end up making compromises. You compromise speed, you compromise cost, you compromise functionality. Having it all really matters. And this morning, I'm excited to spend some time with you understanding the breadth and depth of AWS, because the reality is there is nobody close to having all the functionality of AWS, and that matters. AWS has a robust, diverse, and fully featured platform with over 165 different services. We have core infrastructure building blocks like compute and storage. We also have relational and non-relational databases, analytics, machine learning, IoT, just to name a few. But having a broad range of services is not enough. It's only one part of the equation. You really need to look at the depth and functionality of each and every one of these areas to understand the capabilities of the platform. A lot of providers will be able to check some of these boxes. Some of them maybe can check all of the boxes. But if you look a little deeper, a little closer, you'll see that AWS has by far the most functionality. And it doesn't take long to see this difference when you're trying to build an application. Let me give you a few examples. I'm going to start with the AWS global infrastructure. Now, when you look at this map, it's easy to see the breadth of AWS. This map shows the 20 geographic AWS regions, as well as the 5 that we've announced coming soon, including regions in Hong Kong, Bahrain, Italy, Cape Town, and as Nick mentioned, just last week, we announced our intention to launch a region in Jakarta, Indonesia. But even something as seemingly straightforward as global infrastructure deserves a closer look. Our approach to building infrastructure is different than our competitors in a fundamental way. Each of these regions is actually composed of multiple availability zones. An availability zone is a fully isolated partition of our infrastructure. And by building each of our regions with multiple availability zones, we give our customers the ability to run high availability apps close to their end users while keeping their data resident in the region they choose. This is a completely unique characteristic of the AWS platform. Let's look at a few others. Let's look at databases. It's becoming more and more important to be able to pick exactly the right purpose-built database for your job at hand. Recognizing this, AWS offers 14 database services, double what any other cloud provider offers. And sometimes you need to change your database because your apps change or your requirements change. And to do this, we offer the AWS Database Migration Service to easily migrate between database types. This is the only service out there that makes it easy for you to migrate between SQL and non-SQL or back. Choice matters with storage as well. Sure, you can check the obvious box. You have block storage, you have object storage, and you have file storage. But there's really much more. With block storage, you have lots of volume options. You need different performance options and different reliability options. You need the ability to manage snapshots across all these different volume types. You need to be able to adjust performance and modify volume type on the fly. And if you look at object storage, you want object storage that gives you the best security, the best availability, and the best scalability. But you also want the ability to do object-level control at any scale. And you want the most integrations with other services. And that brings us to file systems. AWS has several file system options. And this is very important because file systems, like databases, need to be tailored to your application. So whether you need a high-scale cloud-native file system, or a simple-to-use Windows file system, or a high-performance scale-out file system, AWS has those offerings, and more. And of course, you need to move your data into and out of these services. And for that, we have 11 unique ways to get your data into AWS or out of AWS, more than you'll find on any other platform. And nothing is more important to our customers than security. And breadth and depth is particularly important here. AWS offers more than 200 different security features and compliance features, by far the most of any cloud provider. If we look at something as important as encryption, all AWS services that store customer data have encryption enabled. That means we have encryption on 116 different services, which is 3 times more than any other provider. And sometimes you need more control than just standard encryption. Sometimes you want to control the keys. And with Amazon KMS or Key Management Service, you can control the keys to 54 AWS services. That's 4 times as many as any other provider. Now, I know I just moved very quickly over a number of different topics. And really, you could double-click into any of the areas and any of the service areas and find the same level of rich functionality and breadth and depth. But today I'm going to spend some time talking to you about how this breadth and depth of these capabilities is the how for getting what you want done. We'll also hear from a couple customers this morning, talking about how they're using this breadth and depth to build their own applications. And maybe at the end, we'll have a little bit of fun. Okay. Almost always when we talk to companies, the reason they choose to move to the cloud is the agility and the speed that it enables. And that's why customers of all sizes and all industries are migrating to AWS in a big way. So let's talk about enabling migration. One of the things we've learned in helping the world's largest enterprises migrate their legacy applications to the cloud is that there is no one-size-fits-all solution. If you want to move as fast as possible, you'll need the deepest and broadest set of tools. And one of the first things that customers do when they're looking to migrate is to migrate their data. As I mentioned earlier, we have 11 unique ways to migrate data into or out of AWS, nearly double what you'll find anywhere else. Let's look at a couple. AWS Snowball is a petabyte-scale data transport appliance that is designed to be secure and transfer large amount of data into and out of the cloud. Transferring data with Snowball is simple, fast, more secure, and can be as little as 1/5 of the cost of using a network. And AWS Snowmobile is the first petabyte-scale data migration service. A Snowball is a secure data truck with 100 petabytes of storage that can be dispatched to your data center, connected directly to your backbone, and used to ingest large amounts of data into AWS. AWS Data Sync is a data transfer service that allows you to more quickly copy data into and out of services like S3 and EFS. You can achieve performance that's 10 times better than tools like Robocopy or rsync. An AWS Storage Gateway is a device that helps you easily connect on-premise applications to AWS storage services. Now, one of the fundamental building blocks of any application is the database. And so we have specific tools to help you migrate your databases. AWS Database Migration Service allows you to migrate your data to AWS. And again, it's important to realize that it allows you to migrate your data into and out of AWS. We've done more than 120,000 databases with this service. Honestbee, an online grocer and food delivery service provider, is running its data warehouse on Redshift. And they're using the AWS Database Migration Service to migrate their Postgres RDS to Redshift. Honestbee is now able to move data to their end users with a latency of under 5 minutes. This compares to the 7 hours they were doing previously. And when we think of migrating applications, we're focused on supporting the environments that your company and your applications are familiar with. A great example is Petronas Lubricants International, or PLI, the global lubricants manufacturing arm of Malaysia's national oil company. Petronas has standardized its application processes and consolidated multiple versions of SAP and non-SAP systems, migrating these to SAP for HANA on AWS. This provides PLI with cost benefits as it rolls this migration out to 30 countries and increases the speed of its dev test cycles. It's also shortened the implementation time by 3 months. By modernizing its apps, PLI is further set up to adopt advanced services such as serverless, IoT, and data lakes to serve its business users across the world. You'll also see Windows up there. And you may be surprised to learn how many Windows workloads are on AWS. AWS has run Windows for over a decade. And according to a report by the IDC, there are nearly 2 times as many Windows servers workloads running on AWS as Microsoft. Our experience running Windows has earned our customers' trust. The number of enterprise customers using Windows on AWS has grown by over 400% in the last 3 years. We have hundreds of thousands of customers bringing Windows to AWS, including Autodesk, which has been running Windows on AWS for over 10 years, and Salesforce, which runs over 10,000 Windows instances. Many of you might be asking, well, what about hybrid? While we believe that the majority of workloads will run almost entirely in the cloud in the fullness of time, it's a priority for us to give customers the ability to run AWS as a seamless extension of their existing infrastructure. If you think about it, pretty much any customer who's not all in on AWS today is running a hybrid architecture. And we see our role in hybrid architecture as making it easy for customers to run their on-premise infrastructure right alongside AWS. By working closely with enterprises, AWS has developed the industry's broadest set of hybrid capabilities across storage, networking, security, application deployment, and management. For example, AWS Direct Connect lets you easily and reliably connect your on-premise environments with AWS through a set of network options and services. Or AWS Outposts, which we announced at reInvent last year, which allows you to bring native AWS services and infrastructures to virtually any data center, co-location facility, or location in the world. Outposts allow you to run compute and storage for certain very low latency workloads on your premises, but in a way that seamlessly extends your on-premise or your existing AWS environment. Snowball Edge Compute Optimized is a great way when you need to run a small amount of compute at the edge in either a network disconnected format or somewhere where you need a ruggedized container. And finally, VMware on AWS allows customers to use the same software they've been using on-premise on the AWS platform. We've seen a lot of momentum for VMware Cloud on AWS, and it's why we've worked so closely with VMware to build a deep partnership. With the launch of VMware Cloud on AWS, Customers have the ability to use the same VMware software and tools that they've been using for years on-premise, but run them on AWS. So, we have many, many customers migrating to the platform or operating in a hybrid as they transition to AWS. But what about those that are building entirely new applications? We have a ton of customers that have built and run on AWS since day one, or they're going through digital transformations and inventing new customer experiences. We talked a lot about migrating apps, but when we're building new apps, customers are moving to an architecture called microservices. What do we mean by a monolithic architecture or microservices? Well, with a monolithic architecture, all your processes are tightly coupled in one application. And this is actually how we built things when I joined Amazon. I joined as a software engineer, and if you can believe it, at the time, there were only a couple dozen software engineers at Amazon. And we all worked on one big piece of code that we called Obidos. And depending upon how you used Obidos, it could do almost anything. It ran the retail website, it also ran our customer service centers, and it could run our fulfillment centers. And one of the things that we learned pretty quickly is that monolithic software doesn't scale. As our software teams grew into the hundreds, we were constantly stepping on each other's toes by breaking the software build, or simply struggling to make changes to an ever-growing code base. What we learned was monolithic software limits experimentation, and it makes it hard to implement new ideas. It also increases availability problems, because a single small problem in your monolithic application can cause impact to lots of other things. It also impacts scaling, because with a monolithic application, if you need to scale one part of the application, you need to scale the whole application. Now, with a microservices architecture, an application is built as independent components that run each application process as a separate service. And that's where they become so valuable, because you can iterate on each microservice to deliver just the functionality the customers of those services need. And at Amazon, we discovered that by factoring our software into small services, we could move a lot more quickly, something we were eager to do. So we started building services for everything. And in a few years, we had hundreds of services. We had services for customer information, services for personalization information. All of these little tiny services replaced Obidos, the monolithic software application. This was a pretty innovative idea back then, but it's even more important today. Because microservices are independently run, each service can be updated, deployed, and scaled to meet the demands of that service. So each engineer has both the knowledge and the authority to make local changes. You end up with the ability to make decisions very quickly and move very quickly. And whenever people talk about how we transferred our internal development processes, they want to know if they can do it themselves. And the good news is, you absolutely can. And we've made the tools that we use available to you as well. We've built services to help with each stage of the development process. And we've also got a service called Code Pipeline, which manages all the stages of development. As we look at the move from monolithic software to microservices, let's look at how compute enables this. Compute has been changing quite a bit. When we first launched EC2, compute was basically virtual machines. Today, we still support that model, and we have a large range of instance types. But we've seen the rise of containerized computing and event-based computing. Today, many of our customers find that a combination of all three of these models works best for them. So let's zoom in on instances. AWS has over 190 different types of instances. We've got general purpose instances, but we also have instances optimized for machine learning or HPC.